The night sky over Normandy was a blanket of thick, low fog. The moonlight barely cut through the clouds. In a well-lit German command post near St. Miraglis, officers gathered around a large oak table covered in maps. Cigarette smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling as they laughed and traded confident remarks. One pointed at the map with his riding crop, smirking. "If the Americans try to jump, they'll land in the swamps and drown like rats." Another joined in, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Their boys are soft. They won't find their way in the dark." They believed the Atlantic Wall, the massive defensive network built over years, was unbreakable. The beaches were fortified, the skies defended, and their confidence was absolute. But while German officers laughed, hundreds of miles away in the cold English night, young American soldiers were loading into planes. C-47 Skytrans lined the runways like silent beasts ready to leap into the unknown. Inside, men of the 101st Airborne Division and 82nd Airborne Division checked their parachutes again and again. Their faces were smeared with charcoal, helmets strapped tight, and eyes burning with a mix of fear and adrenaline. Some clutched family photos tucked into their uniforms. Others silently whispered prayers. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the tip of the spear. Their mission was brutal and simple: jump into Nazi-occupied France hours before the main invasion, seize key roads and bridges, destroy communication lines, and paralyze German reinforcements. Failure wasn't an option, because behind them, at dawn, over 150,000 Allied soldiers would hit the beaches. The paratroopers were the first domino in a plan that would either liberate Europe or drown it in blood. As engines roared to life, the planes lifted off into the black sky. Anti-aircraft guns along the French coast were already on alert. As they approached the Cotentin Peninsula, the pilots could see flak exploding in the distance like fiery flowers. Inside, the red jump light glowed. Hands tightened on static lines. A sergeant yelled above the engine noise. "Stand up! Hook up!" The men moved with the precision of countless drills, even as fear clawed at their stomachs. When the green light flashed, they didn't hesitate. They leapt. The night swallowed them. Wind howled in their ears as tracer fire streaked upward like angry comets. Some planes were hit, some men never even left the aircraft. Those who did found themselves dropping through fog and chaos, scattered far from their intended landing zones. But these weren't ordinary men. They didn't panic. They adjusted. They were airborne. Normandy's countryside was a maze of hedgerows, narrow dirt roads, and dark fields. The German defenders thought this terrain would favor them. What they didn't expect was how effectively small, determined groups of paratroopers could melt into it. All across the Cotentin Peninsula, scattered units from the 101st and 82nd regrouped in the shadows, whispering through the fog. A few found their way to drop zones. Others landed in flooded fields, waist-deep in cold water, tearing themselves free of tangled parachutes under gunfire. Some were alone, but they didn't stop. The Germans at first thought it was just a few men. Confused reports trickled into headquarters. Paratroopers sighted, 1 or 2 squads. Enemy movement on the road, unknown strength. Officers dismissed it with a wave of the hand. Stragglers, they said. No real threat. Their arrogance would cost them dearly. While the Germans slept, the stragglers turned into hunters. A small group ambushed a convoy near Saint-Marie-du-Mont, taking out a truck and scattering the escort with grenades. Another squad blew up a key bridge, forcing German reinforcements to reroute. A handful of men crept into enemy outposts, cutting telephone lines and slashing communication cables. Entire sectors went dark. In St. Miraglis, a sleepy Norman town, German soldiers relaxed in their barracks. They had no idea that, above the clouds, parachutes were already opening. American paratroopers descended silently, like a storm no one could see coming. One German sentry spotted the first wave too late. Within minutes, gunfire echoed through the narrow streets. Paratroopers flooded the town in small teams, moving fast, striking hard, disappearing just as quickly. German defenders were thrown into chaos. Across the countryside, every shadow seemed to move. Every hedgerow hid a potential ambush. The Germans began to panic. "They're everywhere," one radio operator shouted. But there were no organized enemy battalions, no clear front line, just small bands of airborne soldiers, striking with surgical precision. German convoys trying to reach the beaches were delayed, redirected, or wiped out entirely. St. Miraglís fell before dawn. The German officers who had mocked the paratroopers hours earlier now barked frantic orders, but it was too late. The enemy they underestimated had already sunk its fangs deep into their defenses. As the sun crept over Normandy's horizon, the roar of the main invasion began. Naval guns from Allied warships thundered, shaking the earth. Landing craft churned through the surf. The great amphibious assault of Operation Neptune had started. But the Germans were already bleeding. Their command networks were fractured, reinforcements trapped, bridges held or destroyed, communication lines silent. The ghosts of the night had done their work. On the beaches, soldiers of the United States Army stormed ashore, supported by tanks and artillery. They faced fierce resistance, but thanks to the paratroopers, many strongpoints were isolated and blind. German units waited for reinforcements that never came. Columns of armored vehicles sat stuck on backroads, ambushed or forced to deter because of blown bridges. A handful of paratroopers had achieved what entire divisions might have struggled to do. The cost, however, was staggering. Many paratroopers were killed before they could even fire a shot. Some drowned in flooded fields. Others died fighting alone, surrounded, refusing to surrender. For every small band that made history, others vanished into the night, leaving only stories behind. But their sacrifice turned the tide. By midday, German officers who had scoffed the night before were issuing retreat orders or being captured. St. Miraglís, the first town liberated in France, was now firmly under American control. Roads once used for German troop movement now funneled Allied armor deeper inland. The laughter from the night before was gone, replaced by silence and defeat. These paratroopers weren't just soldiers. They were the sharpened edge of the Allied sword. They proved that courage and surprise could shatter even the most fortified defenses. On the night of June 5 to 6, 1944, German officers mocked them. But history remembers them as the men who fell from the sky like ghosts and changed the course of the war forever.